Well, here's a new one to the shop. I was gonna film this yesterday and I forgot. Of course, I got in a hurry and was busy anyways. This is a 2000 Jetta Tdi, which had the problem that it was very difficult to start. Very. And when it did start, when you could keep it running, which was difficult to do, it smoked like a banshee. Giant clouds of blue, white, diesel smoke. Person that picked it up from someone who thought the head gasket was bad. But after I took a look at it, I could tell that smoke was not, your antifreeze typical. It was white, but this is a diesel, an unburned diesel fuel. A lot of times, partially burned or not very well burned diesel fuel will end up being white, very cloudy. I could smell the exhaust. It smelled very much like a rich, nasty diesel. So my first thought after looking through a bunch of stuff, was it was an injector issue, it was a timing issue maybe. But then as I messed with the car a little more, I thought, I bet you anything it's just a bad turbo. Turbo's probably just shot and is blowing oil everywhere inside this thing. So I pulled it apart this morning. Take a look here. Here is your upper intake pipe coming off, comes up from your intercooler this way, goes through your throttle elbow and into your intake. I pulled that first indicator that there's an issue is the amount of raw oil, black raw nasty oil that's sitting inside the intake. I could kind of see looking on the outside how that valve is covered with it on the outside because it's pushing out around the seals under pressure. It's blowing out around that. So then the turbo itself is located down there. I did have to pull off, obviously, to get at that. This is the other intake pipe that comes up. This is your non-pressure side. It fits in down behind here. It hooks up over there from your air cleaner. Fits in behind here. There's two bolts, one there, one down there to take that and get that out. Your one bolt is there. Your other bolt is located right down there. You take those two out, take your clamps off both ends. Pretty sure most folks can figure how to get that out. But as you can see, I cleaned that turbo out. When I pulled that hose off, I cleaned it out with a rag, wiped it around in there to get all the residue out, and you can see the oil. It's already puddling inside that turbo because the bearing shaft seals are more than likely gone. The bearing is pretty much gone. I can reach in there with a finger or two because it's a very tight fit, obviously, but you can get your fingers, trying to get the focus here. You can get your fingers down inside there and go ahead and give that shaft a little wiggle. And it shouldn't have any play, and this has play. It does spin still. I kind of thought maybe it was so trashed it wouldn't even spin. It does spin, doesn't spin well, so I'm 99% sure that is the problem with this car. And someone was going to junkyard it because they thought a head gasket's gone. They don't want to spend the money. Apparently the engine, according to the owner, has only about 40,000 miles, but the car has 230,000 miles on it. So my theory behind that is perhaps if the engine indeed only has 40,000 miles, when they changed it, they did not put a new turbo on the car. They swapped over the turbo, my guess would be, from the original engine. So that turbo has 230,000 miles on it. It's just done. So we'll keep you updated as I get more done on. Okay, so about an hour's worth of work here. We've got the cooler, EGR Cooler, I think it's called, something like that. It sits down in here on top of the exhaust manifold behind the intake manifold, right? So that's got to come out. So there is a hose on this end, hose on that end. The trickiest thing to this guy is right there. There's two bolts under it, one on the top. So those are your Allen head bolts, just like the rest of these are metric. In a pinch, you can use a Torx bit in there if you don't happen to have a metric. But at any rate, we get that guy out. Prior to getting that guy out, I had to pull off the throttle plate and the hose that connects the cooler, EGR cooler, up to that throttle plate. So you got to take this hose off first, right here. It bolts up there, right, on the throttle plate. Down here, you got to take that off first so you can get at this one screw. See, when this hose is in place, up in here, it blocks the access to that screw that pulls that off. Obviously, we have the carbon buildup issue, which plagues these, especially when the turbo's been blowing oil in there, out the exhaust. So that's where we're at now. Let's see here. Oh yeah. Now I can actually get at that exhaust manifold, which is there. This heat shield is on. This heat shield is on right here. And there's two bolts, nuts actually, that hold that on. You gotta pull that out of the way just so you can get access to that top, those studs right there that hold the exhaust manifold on. One on top, one on bottom, obviously all the way along underneath here, all the way along underneath your intake, all the way across. There's the turbo. There's the turbo feed line, which I'm going to have to unthread there. And there's, of course, a drain line on the bottom. Okay, so turbo is out. I elected to pull the intake manifold off to make it easier and to get it out the top. Partly because it was easier than getting it out the bottom and pulling the drive shaft out of the front. And partly because this thing's so carboned up, I want to rinse it out anyways and clean it. So here is our turbo. I don't know if I can get a good shot of how here is our turbo. Yeah, it's hard to see this in here. It's too bright out today. But there is a whole bunch of play. I mean, it may not look like a lot here, but any play on a turbo shaft is too much. And there's definitely play on that turbo shaft. I showed you before in the car. Yeah, this is hard to see, but yeah, see that right there? You can. It's moving around. There's oil. That's a telltale sign. There's a bunch of oil in the output of the turbo too, so it was blowing oil everywhere in there. So now it's out. I'll show you the when you pull that intake manifold off, you get lots of room to pull it straight up the top. So I'm getting a new turbocharger for that. So the new turbocharger showed up for the Jetta today. There it is, nice and shiny. Had to transfer over a few things. It came with new studs here, all these new studs for it. Had to transfer over the oil fitting from the top. It came with a new copper gasket for that, copper washer, crush washer on there. And there's new studs that go over here on the exhaust side, but I'm going to leave that for now because it's easier to slide it in there without those in the way, and I'll thread them in when I get down there. So, yeah, she's going in. See how it goes here. Hopefully we'll be running today, maybe, with a lot less smoke and a lot more power. Yesterday, I did actually manage to get the entire brand new turbo all stuck in down there. So everything's on, everything's together. Went to fire it up yesterday right before I went to work, and it wouldn't start. It would start and die, just fire for a second, die. So did a little troubleshooting today. It was throwing a code for the glow plugs. Check that. It's a code P0320, I believe. So I did some research into that, figured out how to check the glow plugs. Glow plugs are here under this plastic harness right there. There's 4 of them, 1 for each cylinder. That harness just pops off like spark plugs. They just pop off, and there's little plugs there. And you can check the resistance on them. So I checked the resistance on the glow plugs. They should be like 0.5 ohms or less, like really low. These are like 100 to 150 ohms, so they're bad. But a little trick to try, and I tried to see if it would make them work, because they do have some resistance. They're not completely open, so they're not completely burned out. They're just really worn out. So back behind this section here, on the back side of that, is a plug. And you can't even really see it from here at all, but there's a plug on the back side of that housing, and that's your temperature, your water temp plug, and that's what the ECU uses to determine if it's hot or it's cold, because it measures the ambient temp while the car is just sitting here. So if you unplug it, it'll think it's cold, and instead of running these glow plugs for just a few seconds, it'll run them for 20 seconds. So I did that. I ran them for, got it pulled that off, turned them on, cycled them for 20 seconds, tried it, didn't start. So I cycled them for 20 seconds a couple more times, because I figured maybe with a long enough cycle, they'll actually create some heat in there. And after a couple times, it does start up. It will fire up, and I can keep it running. So that's good. The bad news is it still smokes like crazy. Which it did before, and I assumed it was just, it's really rich smelling, and I assumed it was just the turbo was bad, blowing oil everywhere. The turbo was bad. It was blowing oil all over the exhaust, into the exhaust, but it still does it. It runs on 3 cylinders, I believe. So there's a cylinder that's not firing, at least not firing correctly, which I believe is what all that smoke is from. So, I got to look into that. Why isn't it, firing? Is it bad compression? I hope it's not. I'm hoping it's something else, like a stuck fuel injector or something. It's just spraying fuel in there, or something's up with it. I don't know. It could very likely be bad compression on one cylinder, or it could just be these glow plugs. I figured if I ran it long enough, if one cylinder wasn't heating up at all, if you run the engine long enough, they will get hot enough they'll all start running well. But so far that hasn't been the case. I might bring it down off the jack stands here and take it for a spin and see if it clears up. See if I can get it to run right, and then it'll tell me it's just the glow plugs that are all bad, and just it won't fire up when it's cold. It is a nice looking little car though, so I really hope it works out, because I don't have too much in it at this point, but it's a nice car. You make a great car for somebody. So the continuing saga of the little Jetta here, I did manage to get the diesel compression tester today, and to test this, I had like 350 PSI on the first cylinder. I couldn't get at that one because I didn't want to remove those lines. And that cylinder right there, when I pulled out the glow plug looked like that, which was not a good sign, because obviously it's a whole lot of carbon and junk that shouldn't be on the tip of a glow plug. This is the cylinder next to it, right? And I can get this to focus here. Right, there's that glow plug. Fairly clean. That's what you expect. Clean to a little white carbon soot, whatever. So when I tested that cylinder with the bad glow plug, I got 0 PSI on the compression tester. So there's the problem why it's running on 3 cylinders. It has a completely shot cylinder, apparently. So back to the drawing boards with this. It's got a brand new turbo on it now, which is unfortunate, because I'm probably going to have to pull this whole engine out and get that cylinder. Maybe I can get away cheap and just throw a new piston and rings and stuff in that cylinder, because the bottom end looked good when I had it apart. The oil pan was off of it. Nothing looked bad down there. The valve train on top looks perfect, immaculate.